But soldiers of the Army National Guard, service members, and our sister services present, I know we got a few Air Force out there. Army Chief of Staff, General James Mcconnell, thank you for what you do every day for our nation. It's an incredible honor to speak to our citizen soldiers who are willing to put everything in the line of service for this nation. I recognize the sacrifices this requires. It means time away from your jobs, your professions, your families, your communities. Over the past 20 months, our nation has faced some incredibly turbulent times, and there's been significant challenges. I'm incredibly proud of your accomplishments, and I know some of the other speakers have talked about them. No one else could have done what you did. And lest we forget, as I speak, there's almost 5,300 National Guard service members that are coming together from 4 different states, principally the state of Louisiana, to respond to Hurricane Ida and all that it brought to the state of Louisiana. They are complemented by active component capabilities that have been brought, prepared to deploy, and will move as soon as it's safe to the state of Louisiana, so a total force can respond to that disaster, just like we have with everything else together. Ladies and gentlemen, General Mcconnell wishes he could be here with you today. There's quite a bit of work to be done in evacuating our Afghanistan vulnerable citizens, the special immigration visa applicants, the remaining American citizens, and all the soldiers who deployed with little to no notice to go secure HKIA, the international airport in Kabul, Afghanistan. This past weekend, I took time to visit Fort McCoy and Fort Bliss, and as I'll talk to you about later, the National Training Center. And I will tell you that just like our response to Ida, you would be blown away with what's happened in the past week to 10 days at those locations: Fort Lee, Virginia, Camp Atterbury, Fort Pickett, and anywhere else that the United States Army's asked to stand up capability and be given a mission. And so you've seen this total force team of teams come together with no time to form, storm, and norm as a team, and yet mission themselves, operationalize their process, continue to ask for resources, and magic happens. I've been serving for 35 years, and I've watched this firsthand and at a distance, time after time after time again. And you know what? We'll see this mission through too, just like we did the others. And we'll continue to move forward because we've got to focus on our people. We've got to maintain our readiness. Who knows what's next? I know that if I asked you to raise your hands, I'd probably have a universal response when someone said, or if I asked you the question, after COVID hit, did you look at yourself in the mirror and say, what else could happen? Think about it. The past 20 months have been incredible. And I realize that it's had an impact on you, your relationship with your employers, and your families. Service does not come without sacrifice, but we could not have done what we have done or will do without you. At last year's conference, General Mcconnell shared his thoughts on our most consequential transformation in 40 years. Needless to say, a lot's happened in the past 12 months, and I'll share with you some insight from my foxhole, from a total force perspective, on where we are and where I think we're going. But first, next chart. I want to tell you a little bit about me. I won't spend too much time on this. But first, I want to share with you some things so you can better understand my perspective. I've been in the regular Army now for 35 years after graduating from the United States Military Academy in 1986. In the top left-hand side of the chart, you'll see a picture of my wife, Leanne, my bride of 33 years. I would not be here without her. On the bottom right, you see me with General Odierno when I commanded the 2nd Brigade, 1st Infantry Division. There's 2 messages associated with that. Number 1, I'm a Big Red 1 soldier. I've fought in combat. I've commanded in combat 3 times with that division, so you know where my heart is. I've served a lot at Fort Hood. I love Central Texas. I love the Central Texas people, but I've commanded 3 times in combat with that formation. But I also want to tell you that in that picture, probably somewhere close in the background there's some 56th Brigade National Guard soldiers who stood side by side with us in North Baghdad as we continue to develop and advise and enable the Iraqi security forces. He was visiting us at that time when we were working with a team. And one of the battalions was attached to our brigade for that fight. So the last thing I did with the 1st Infantry Division is I went to Fort Riley, Kansas, commanded the division, and then following that I was assigned at the Pentagon and served as the Director of the Army Staff, and since 2019 I've been the Vice Chief of Staff. I ensure the Army's enterprise is aligned with vision, guidance, but really, what does the Vice Chief do? Just about everything that the Chief can't or does not want to do. He wanted to be here but could not, therefore the Vice Chief of Staff is talking to you. And there's many other fun things that I do. I rarely get to travel, so this is an opportunity for me to be here today, to be honest with you. But I'm the COO of a $3.9 trillion company. It's got about 1 million employees. We're in 140 companies, and we run an annual budget of about $178 billion. And there's never a dull day, as you all know. But I also focus on the welfare of our soldiers, families, civilians, and the readiness of our force, guiding the modernization effort, among other things. So there's a little bit about me. My intention's not to woe you. It's to let you know that I've been around the block a few times, and I've served with National Guard service members on multiple occasions. So I hope you believe me when I say that based on my experiences, I consider you to be indispensable. I saw it when I commanded the Combined Joint Forces Land Component Command during Operation Inherent Resolve, where the National Guard soldiers, to include the 77th and 29th Combat Aviation Brigades out of Arkansas and Maryland, brought the fight to the Islamic State, where we ultimately led to the liberation of Mosul, something that people told me when we got there that wouldn't happen in 3 years, did it in 8 months. I saw it in garrison in the 1st Infantry Division when I was the commander there, when the National Guard soldiers from the Nebraska National Guard augmented our division command post through a warfighter exercise, and then later in Iraq, and then in another warfighter exercise after Iraq. This support allowed us to assume a forward mission command post in Poznan, Poland as well. We could not have done it without them. I saw it as the commander of the National Training Center, where National Guard brigades routinely would build upon their proficiency against a world-class Op-4 and depart battle-hardened, forged by the unforgiving Southern California desert and all the adversity that it delivers for us all. So believe me when I say that I understand your importance, and that we must ensure we're given the resources and time to train, to modernize, and care for people appropriately. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. Now that you've heard a little about me, let's talk about you. Next chart. I want to take a few moments with this chart and all that it relates to with the Army's transformation. 1, The Army National Guard is no stranger to continual transformation. You've shown remarkable agility over the past 100 years. 2, the Army National Guard's ability to transform contributed directly to some of America's greatest victories. The pictures show a progression from the oldest to the top left to the most recent at the bottom right. On the top left, you see National Guard soldiers readying to provide security along our southern border in 1916, 105 years ago. On the bottom right, you see the Illinois National Guard soldiers training alongside our Polish allies. Over time, we've progressed to a total force where more often than not, it's hard to tell the difference between an active duty soldier and a guardsman. The impetus of this progression is an ever-changing world requiring the full might of this great nation. During the First World War, the National Guard transformed to make up nearly 40% of the American Expeditionary Force combat strength. During the interwar years and the Second World War, the Guard fielded new armored capabilities, providing a rapid mobilization capability to the Army, and fought alongside the regular Army. To paraphrase Secretary of War Robert Patterson at the end of the war, the National Guard took to the field with 18 divisions, 300,000 soldiers, doubling the strength of the Army at once. Guard soldiers fought in every action, making a brilliant record on every fighting front. They've proved once more the value of trained citizen soldiers. Those are his words, not mine. The Guard served in all capacities during the Korean War and served with distinction during the Cold War in a deterrence capacity. On Saturday, I had the incredible opportunity to be the keynote speaker at the National Training Center's 400th rotation anniversary. I pointed out a few things about our victory in Operation Desert Storm that would not have been possible without the NTC. Take a quick drink, please. Equally important was the ability of the National Guard to transform with the regular Army after the Vietnam War. This last great transformation allowed our Army to once again become the greatest land force the world has ever seen. But it had to be a total force. It included new doctrine, air-land battle, new organizations in our combat training centers, and of course, our Big Five combat platforms. The culmination was the culmination point of that transformation was the 100-hour defeat of the Iraqi army. At that time, the world's fourth largest army. During that conflict, the Army moved combat power at a rate of 95 kilometers per day, faster than any army in history. That's including the German Wehrmacht in World War II. During the conflict, we moved over 1,800 Army helicopters, 12,400 track vehicles, 114,000 wheel vehicles, almost 48,000 containers, and 350,000 tons of ammunition to another side of the planet to do that. We distributed our personnel, equipment, and supplies with 35 million miles of logistical lines of communications with 3,500 convoys supporting that huge army that we fielded quickly. A transformed National Guard was an integral part of these achievements. Truly, your motto of always ready, always there is very fitting. Let's go to chart 4. This chart's a quick snapshot of our strategic environment. We're facing great power competition, rogue nations, persistent terror threats from extremist organizations, and regular humanitarian crises, like we're seeing in Haiti right now, like we're seeing with the evacuation from Afghanistan. We're no longer able to rely on our current capabilities to dominate the future battlefield. Just like we realized this in the 70s, we're realizing it now, and we're moving out with that. We will be contested in every domain. Think space, air, sea, subsea, land, cyber, information environment, all of them will be in competition. And if we're to be successful in this environment, the total Army must transform just as it did 40 years ago. This transformation is not about fighting the last war better. It's about winning the next one, and most importantly, winning the first battle in crisis or conflict of the next war. So where do we stand just 12 months after General Mcconnell addressed you last? Despite the challenges of the past 20 months requiring our attention and resources, we've remained committed to this transformation, recognizing multi-domain capable forces equates to readiness tomorrow. To buy readiness for tomorrow, we've had to make some tough compromises on end strength. Where we were on a glide path and growing in all three components, we are currently flatline, no more future growth, at 485,000 in the active component, 336,000 in the National Guard, and 189,500 in the reserve, is about the minimum size force we need. Note what I said. We've emphasized the importance of land combat power in the Indo-Pacific and are demonstrating our value to the combatant commander there through our security force assistance brigades and, frankly, our state partnership programs as well. When people think of the Pacific, though, and they look at a map, they see a lot of blue. And so they want to naturally gravitate to naval and air-centric solutions. And with what I can tell you in this environment is those solutions that work so well in isolation and stovepipes in the past for us will fail us in the future. It will take a total joint force to defeat our adversaries in the Pacific and, for that matter, in the European theater as well. Anybody who thinks elsewise, I tell them they're mistaken. Those are important, no doubt. But the Army's land forces have an important role to play to open doors and develop partner capacity in that region. See, there's a lot of blue, but there's one thing for sure. All the people, unless they're fishing, live on land. The National Guard is very familiar with this. We consistently hear from all combatant commanders and our multinational partners about how great the state partnership program is. In fact, General Mcconnell just recently returned from travels, and all of his counterparts spoke highly of you all and what you do. The state partnership program truly allows us to stay engaged, provide access, presence, and influence. You think we would be able to do what we're doing coming out of the Middle East if we didn't have relationships, access, presence, and influence with the Qataris, the Bahrainians, the Kuwaitis? No, we wouldn't. State partnership programs help us with that. We've stood up the first multi-domain task force to provide multi-domain capabilities to combatant commanders. Multi-domain task forces will deliver multiple domain effects to deter and, if necessary, penetrate adversary anti-axis and aerial denial capabilities. You see, they've been studying us, our adversaries, for the past 20 years while we were focusing in the Middle East. And they've created capabilities that they think that they can technically defeat the exquisite capabilities we have in our various services. But we've got the edge, and here's why. We'll continue to develop new capabilities, and we will place in the hands of commanders decision-making capability that will be nothing like you've ever seen before. And when we do that, because of our professional leadership at echelon in all components of the United States Army, and our joint partners for that matter, we will prevail. But it will take time, it will take patience, and we can never lose our focus on maintaining readiness now, because who knows what tomorrow will bring. The one thing we know for sure is that we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow for sure. We're also standing up the 56th Artillery Command, a theater fires command commanded by a two-star general in Europe. They're going to coordinate artillery across the theater and also impose multiple domain effects. We're executing some annual experiments you might have read about in your publications or in some trade publications. It's called Project Convergence. I went to Project Convergence 20 last year, and I was blown away with what our talented people are accomplishing. It's almost science fiction. We'll include our joint partners this year during Project Convergence 21, and ultimately, we're going to do Project Convergence to allow us to see, understand, decide, and act before a potential adversary. Think about the power of big data, AI, and machine learning. We have engineers, United States Army engineers, that are developing this capability, have been for several years, and you can see it live during Project Convergence. We're taking a look at our formations and how they're aligned to meet multi-domain capable force requirements. Some of the divisional organization changes that General Hokanson talked to you about, General Jensen's probably talked to you about, are one of several actions we're looking to continue to realign our forces so that we can fight, we believe, division-centric in the future. Compo 2, ABCT, and IBCT formations will be included as part of the Waypoint 2028 force. Not all of them, but a part will be. We're implementing the Regionally Aligned Readiness and Modernization Model, or REARM for short. REARM's designed to bring predictability and stability to the total force. To be totally transparent, we're just now finalizing our work for the active component, but for the reserve component, that's our next priority. You see, REARM includes a modernization phase, a training phase, and a mission window, which includes mobilization, post-mobilization, as it pertains to you, and a standard 9-month deployment time period, and then demobilization. But the whole idea is to give some predictability. Similar to what efforts we've done in the past, but we've never actually prioritized modernization as a phase of our formation's cyclical activity. We're going to do that now. Because what we've learned over time, and we've all experienced this, if you're doing something else like training and you're modernizing at the same time, both things are done suboptimally. You've got to prioritize activities. Soldier lethality modernization for Compo 2 IBCTs will include the next generation squad weapon rifle, the enhanced night vision goggles, IVAS, and the soldier ballistic potential or protection. And we will remain on course to modernize the Compo 2 utility helicopter fleet by fiscal year 34. This will enable future vertical lift programs to mature along with the Army's priorities. Very important to do. These things that I've just mentioned only skim the surface. To paraphrase General Fred Croson, there is no magical elixir, no silver bullet that can promise success in war. This is the heart of our transformation. We recognize no single capability, component, or service will lead to victory alone. But transformation's not easy, and this will take time. In reference to the Army's stunning victory in the Gulf War, General Barry McCaffrey said it best when he stated, "This war didn't take 100 hours to win, it took 15 years. We realize that. So we're going to be patient, transparent, and communicate, over-communicate. Let's go to the next chart. As I understand it, General Hokanson talked about his priorities, and the first priority is people. Is that correct? I want to talk to you about something, and I like talking to this diverse audience about this. But I want to tell you what this picture of this house represents to me. Imagine being the person, however many years or decades ago, that bought that house, how proud they were, how much money they paid for it, and how many people they planned on showing this beautiful landscape. And then the foundation starts eroding. And no matter what you do with that house now, no matter how much paint you put on it, how many other exquisite items you put on it, without some significant foundational work, that house is no longer inhabitable, has no value, and will fall off a cliff. I know we have multiple service members in here, but I'd ask you to think about the harmful behaviors we're attacking right now. Because just like the water and the weather eroded the foundation of that gorgeous house, these harmful behaviors of sexual assault, sexual harassment, racism, extremism, and suicide are eroding the foundation of our profession and could potentially become an existential threat to us all. Because if people don't want to serve in the Army, or any service for that matter, that's existential for us. We are attacking this. But it takes a team of teams. And I've had many conversations with General Jensen, in particular about suicide. Because it's a wicked problem to solve in the National Guard. Because unlike where I can bring every division commander on the net, and we talk about some suicides and other things that we're working on, it's more difficult to do when you're spread across 54 states and territories. But you're all represented here, and I'll tell you, I'm committed to helping you any way that I can. I don't know how uniquely that'll be. There are things that we're doing with big data that I'm going to share with the regular Army that I'd like to share with y'all. But we got to get after this. There's some things that have changed. I'm not going to sit up here and talk about all the things in society, but there's some things that have changed, and we've got to embrace them and bring in the 1 in 300 in this country into our service and acknowledge what they have and what they don't have. And what they don't have that you may have had when you joined, it's okay. We own it, and we're going to help develop them. Give them the resiliency skills so that they can prevail in a competitive world. It's as simple as that. But feel free to take me up on my offer to help out. I see all your data. I see every compost data. Ladies and gentlemen, we lost 321 soldiers total force last year to death by suicide. That's a small battalion. And every one of them's got a story. I see everything on every one of them. We got some work to do. So I hate to close on that note, but I wanted to talk to you about it. I wanted you to know I'm looking at it, and I wanted you to know I'm here to help you, if I can. But I wish you all the best in the rest of your time here, and I have full faith and confidence in what you'll do when we ask you to respond at the state level or beyond in the future, because we could not do what we have done, nor what we will do without you. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Answer and you want to do a few questions?
Yeah, I'd be happy. I'd be happy to.
Step down there if you want. Watch your step.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, General Martin's agreed to take a few questions. He's going to step down on the platform here. I'll moderate it from up here. If anybody has any questions for the Vice Chief, please step up. We've got a microphone to my left and one to my right. We've got about a 15-minute block of questions scheduled. So go ahead. I see somebody stepping up here on the left. Go ahead, sir.
Hey, good morning, sir. John Driscoll, Land Component Commander, Massachusetts Army National Guard, Nations First. Hey, sir, my question is about force structure and asking about the validation of the National Guard, Army Guard force structure and in line with the Army doctrine for the multi-domain operations, and asking, is that going to be approved anytime soon, or is that still part of that modernization rearm effort, sir?
Okay, great question. I've always been coached, don't say great question, but it is a great question, and it should be on everybody's mind here. We are continuing, what's interesting is we were growing as a total force. Reorganizing would be a lot easier because you don't have to say, okay, we're going to create this new formation. Who's the bill payer? And that's what we got to do. And so it's a zero-sum game. And so we are, as we are continuing to refine what Waypoint 2028 and the aim point 2035 force looks like, we're taking a hard look at capability that exists in every compo and asking ourselves the question, is it in the right place? I can't get into the details, but if you can imagine, if we're asked to be somewhere in a certain amount of time and most of a certain capability only resides in one location that takes 30 to 45 days to ready based on the readiness that we can produce with that formation, it may not be in the right place. So we're taking a hard look at this. We'll be very transparent as we do the total Army analysis process that we do every year and continue to make adjustments to our formations in all components so that we can be ready in the future to meet the needs of our combatant commanders. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. And I know you can't get to specifics, but any type of timeline for that TAA of when?
Well, the TAA happens every year. So right now we're doing TAA, I think, 24. And what that does is that informs in advance the structure that we know when we build the 24 program next spring, we'll have that structure. So TAA is 1 year ahead of our program objective memorandum. Got to think in time in this job. And so it happens every year, though. It's a zero-based review every year. I'm not certain, but I think we're the only service that does that every year. No kidding, zero-based review. And so it won't come out as a grand, here's the big change, we're doing this all at once. There will be small incremental changes, once again, because it's a zero-sum game in terms of if you're going to stand up a new capability, where do you get the structure to resource that capability?
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, over here on my right.
Sir, Captain Beckman, Utah Army National Guard, thanks for being here. General, just to throw another general under the bus, General Aguto earlier said we should reserve our hard questions for you.
That's all right. He's flying back with me, and I'm going to have him in the back of the plane, if he happens to be in the room. Did he also tell you that I was his squad leader at West Point 35 years ago?
He did not, sir.
Okay. So if you liked him, blame me. If you didn't like him, don't blame me, because it's been 35 years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I really appreciated your last slide talking about foundation, and I'd like to share a thought from a professor of law at University of Utah who's been doing a lot of research into this. And he recently, when addressing a small group in Utah, talked about the fact that, from his perspective, the biggest threat to the Army is not Russia or China, but it is an enabling culture internally that is allowing a lot of the problems that you laid out to persist. The problem specifically being not necessarily how we handle those incidents when they occur, but it's our inability to address the behaviors and attitudes and actions that are not as perceptible, but are allowed to endure up until those points. And his point is that the biggest threat to us is that we are one more incident away from losing all public trust. And that's the concern, and we look at incidents like Fort Hood and others, and then also we see incidents that we capture that it takes a long time to then get those people out of the military, and that is being seen and observed in the public, and that obviously affects recruiting, affects retention. And so, sir, my question is, what should we be doing, or what can we be doing better to not put the onus on the victims as much to capture those microaggressions, if we want to use that term, but capture those behaviors that are not as offensive as assault or harassment, but are definitely preludes to those types of behaviors, that we can capture that a lot sooner than we currently are?
How much time do I have? Who's your next speaker? I mean, I'm Woody in Toy Story. You just pulled my string about 18 feet back that way. I'm ready to talk. So here's what I'll tell you. You're absolutely right. You've got to get you've got harmful behaviors have to be fixed beforehand. I'll share with you some things that I'm trying to do right now. So you can imagine, and I'm trying not to get into specifics, but I'll just say, you've got soldiers that come from backgrounds that aren't exactly perfect, okay? Not every soldier's the same. I grew up in a two-parent family, but not every soldier did. Some people grow up with parents who are alcoholics. Some people grow up with parents who cheat on each other. Some people grow up in communities where they slap each other on the fourth point of contact. What's the big deal, okay? There's a whole bunch of other factors. Fact of the matter is, each and every soldier is a unique individual. They're unique. And yet, when we bring them into the Army, we put them in a classroom, we put them in a learning environment, and we broadcast to them as if they're all the same, and they're not. So we're in the process of, I took every service's, every service has an assessment instrument that they use when they bring folks in. Different services use it for different reasons. We actually had two, one for suicide, and there's this one called TAPAS, measures grit. We're going to come up with a survey that's going to try to identify these gaps in the swings of our soldiers as they come in. Not to screen them out so they can't come in, but so that we know what they're missing. And then, and this is no easy task, then we're going to take those gaps and create curriculum that either soldier can self-learn, an environment soldier wants to learn in, read Z economy and you know what I'm talking about, or allow their supervisors to teach them as individuals, develop them as individuals. Because the one thing I can tell you is our current process where we bring everybody into one room and we broadcast like I'm speaking to you right now, I'm getting through to some of you, others I'm not. It's not detailed. And you say, well, that's going to be impossible to do. I said, I disagree. We have this physical, so there was a time when we wanted to decrease the number of basic training losses to injuries and the like in basic training. We said, well, we got to come up with a way to assess a soldier's physical proficiency before they start basic training, and then based on the score on that assessment, they can go and develop on those weaknesses and improve upon those weaknesses as they do that. It's called the OPAT. We do it with every single soldier that we recruit now, and it gives us a measurement of their physical capabilities so that we know what to work on when they arrive. Well, it's a much more complicated when you talk about resilient character and those type of assessments. It'd be much more difficult to do, but that's what we're going to do, and it's going to be available for everybody to use. I'm convinced that's the approach we've got to take, because then you start developing the soldier as an individual and you get ahead of the behaviors that it's too late. You've already done something wrong and now we've got to hold you accountable. I think that's what you're talking about.
Sir, if I could just follow up, what about senior leaders that are also in need of those types of trainings? So from a top-down perspective.
I agree. So, we don't do it in Compo 2 yet, but the United States Army, what we have now is we have the Commander Assessment Program. And if you go into Battalion Command and Brigade Command, you go through a very rigorous assessment, including a 360 assessment where not you, but we pick the people that you have served with in the past, above you, below you, and around you, to tell us what kind of leader you are. And it's provided us some incredible feedback, and it's allowed us to identify some leaders that, on paper, they might have been wonderful, but now we find out, yeah, they delivered, but when they delivered, they crushed their subordinates, or they weren't good teammates with their colleagues. So that's what we're doing. And then, I don't know if you know it, but I'm the one that holds general officers accountable across all components of the United States Army. And so what I'll tell you is, rest assured, we're holding them accountable when we find out that they're not living up to the values or the traits and characteristics that we expect of our most senior leaders in the military.
Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Okay, over here on my left, it'll be our
I don't know
last
if you were
question.
clapping for him or clapping for me. Good job.
Sir,
Over
Major
here on my
Sims.
left, and this will be our last question.
Major Sims from the state of Washington. I'm the H2F project officer for our state. I'm one of 54 trying to implement holistic health and fitness across our formations. First, I just wanted to thank you. Major Short, our lead back at NGB, is always talking about the support we get from yourself and General McConnell and Major General Hibbert and the staff there at CIMT that's spearheading H2F. When I took on this job and we started looking at how we were going to implement our programs, I got asked, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen if we don't do this? And I had to think about that for a minute. And for me, the worst that could happen is we die. So we die from chronic illness, trauma, suicide. Our formations die from attrition. So the worst that can happen is we die. If we implement these programs, we can mitigate those risks. We can give the performance and resiliency tools to our members who then go back in the community and build performance and resiliency in their family, in their communities, in their sports teams, in their high schools. Wherever they go, we bring those ethos with us. As we look towards building these programs and kind of continue to do what we've been doing, one of the issues we run into is funding. When we look at modernizing the force and modernizing the soldier, H2F could be a tool to help modernize the soldier with the tools that they need to perform and be resilient in the job while they're in the uniform, but then also when they're out of the uniform and they go back into those communities and help build those communities to be stronger with the ethos that we all know and love among the members that are so near and dear to us. When we look at right now, there is no funding for what we're trying to do, and some of our programs are going to start running into a point where they're going to need funding to continue or they're going to stop, and our positions will go away, and H2F as a whole just won't exist in our formations. Are there any plans for, as our COAs come up, as Major Short puts our COAs together and our 10-year projections of budgets and presents those to you, are there plans to have any funding for National Guard H2F programs?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll take that back and I'll relay the answer to General Jensen. We've got H2F. I think there's something there, but we got to be very careful about it too. We got to measure its effectiveness, and it should be across all components, if you ask me. But we've got to measure its effectiveness and make sure we understand that the return on investment is worth the resources that we're putting against it. But I know what we're doing in the active component. I got to find out more about what we're doing in the reserve component, and I'll get you an answer. But that's for everybody if you're wondering about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, General Martin, thank you very much.
Let me
Make
say,
a couple closing remarks.
just look, it's been a pleasure to be here. Remember what I said. We could not have done, nor could we do what we'll have to do in the future without you. I think that's really important to understand. And who the heck knows what tomorrow will bring. I've got 43 seconds, so God bless you all.
Well, thanks, sir. We got a quick presenter. We'll get a photo up here. General Martin, we want to thank you for being here today with the association. We have a small ornament and token of our appreciation. It's the 109th Airlift Wing doing support to the National Science Foundation and our C-130s from the New York Air National Guard, one of the many unique missions our Guard does to support not only our state, our nation, but all of our partners as well. So we'll get that down here. Will the Sergeant at Arms please come forward and escort our distinguished guest and his party from the platform?